All stories on this channel are original content, fully protected by copyright and intellectual property laws. Any unauthorized copying, re-uploading, narration, or use of these stories will be considered copyright infringement and may lead to serious legal consequences. These stories are exclusively owned by this channel. Respect the rights or face legal action. This story was sent to me by one of my subscribers, Emily Parker, and I wanted to share it on the channel. There was a heavy thunderstorm that night. Nothing dangerous, but strong enough to keep everyone inside for the rest of the evening. I've always been one of those people who enjoy rainy nights and storms. Something about them makes me feel cozy and calm. Whenever the weather was like this, I'd curl up on the couch, watch a movie, and listen to the rain tapping against the windows. Luckily, I didn't have work the next day. Even though it was already 8 p.m., I decided to make myself a hot cup of coffee and stay up late to enjoy the storm. I sat down, turned on a movie, and settled in. About 20 minutes into the film, my phone started ringing. The number wasn't saved in my contacts, but the area code was local. Thinking it might be important, I answered. "Hello?" I said. No one replied. "Can I help you?" I asked again. Still nothing. It wasn't complete silence, though. I could hear faint background noise, something messy and distorted. After a moment, I realized it sounded like rain, just like the storm outside. I knew someone was there, but they weren't speaking. Feeling uneasy, I hung up. I figured it was some kind of mistake or scam call. I tossed my phone onto the end table and went back to my movie. About an hour later, the storm outside grew worse. Thunder boomed, lightning flashed, and heavy rain slammed against the roof. The lights and TV flickered, then everything went dark. The power was out. The silence in the house was instantly replaced by the roar of the storm. The only light I had was a small candle I barely ever used. I lit it and decided to check the breaker in the basement, but it was completely dead. When I came back upstairs, I noticed that all the houses on my street were dark too. It wasn't just me. I stood by the window, staring out into the storm for about 15 minutes. That's when I heard it, the creak of my backyard gate swinging open. My stomach dropped. That gate never just opened on its own. I walked quietly to the back door and looked out through the glass. Through the darkness and sheets of rain, I saw him. A man. He was standing in the middle of my backyard, motionless. I couldn't see his face, just his shadowy outline illuminated by flashes of lightning. Was he looking at me or away? I didn't know what to do. My instinct told me not to open the door or shout. Anyone wandering around in a storm like this couldn't be in their right mind and might be dangerous. I stayed completely still, watching. After a minute, he slowly lifted one of his hands to his head. A small glowing light appeared in his palm. It took me a second to realize what it was. A phone screen. At that exact moment, my phone in the other room started ringing. I froze. It was the same number. The realization hit me hard. The person outside was the one who had called earlier. That faint rain sound I'd heard before, it was because he was standing outside my home even then. Panicked, I rushed to the living room and grabbed my phone. It was definitely the same number. I didn't answer. When I ran back to the door, the man was gone. My heart was pounding. I didn't want to move, but standing there in front of the dark window made me feel even more exposed. I backed away, grabbed my phone again, and debated calling the police. But what would I even say? Someone called me twice and stood in my backyard? It felt absurd, until the phone rang again. I jumped. I declined the call. Seconds later, there was a loud, violent knock at the front door. Then another. And another. Whoever it was began pounding on the door with heavy blows that rattled the frame. My hands were trembling as I muted my phone and froze in fear. The storm outside screamed as the banging grew frantic. Finally, I snapped out of it and called the police. The dispatcher said an officer was already nearby and on their way. I could barely speak as the man outside continued slamming against the door. After what felt like forever, the dispatcher told me the officers had arrived on my street. Moments later, I heard shouting outside. I peeked through the window and saw an officer chasing a man through the storm. Then they both disappeared into the darkness. A few minutes later, the officer returned, alone. The man had escaped. The police took my statement and treated the situation seriously, especially since they had actually seen him. The only real lead was the phone number, but it turned out to be fake. I tried to think of anyone who might want to scare me like that, but no one came to mind. The case eventually went cold. Since that night, I haven't received another strange call, and I hope I never do. Thank you to Emily Parker for sending this terrifying story. If you have a story, send it in and it might be featured next.
This story was sent to me by one of my subscribers, Jason Miller, and I wanted to share it on the channel. My childhood friend Ethan and I were out in the forests of Maine for a short camping trip. We were both fairly experienced campers, but this was Ethan's first time visiting that particular spot. I'd been there plenty of times before, so I knew the area well. We backpacked for several hours along a rough trail before finally reaching a small clearing where we decided to set up camp. It was around 6 p.m. when we got the tents pitched and built a fire. We made food, cracked open a few beers, and sat around the fire talking as the sun sank below the trees. It was a peaceful evening, until we both heard something moving just outside the light of the fire. The noise came from somewhere in the darkness beyond the campsite. We both looked around, but the sound stopped. We didn't see anything else for the rest of the night and figured it was just an animal wandering by. Out there, that kind of thing was normal, and we didn't think twice about it. After a while, we put out the fire and went to bed. The next morning, we woke up early and decided to visit a small hidden pond about half a mile through the woods from our camp. It was one of the reasons I loved this spot so much. The pond had a little waterfall and a stream that ran through the trees, a perfect, quiet place to relax. We spent several hours there before heading back to camp to eat and rest. I took a short nap as the sun began to lower in the sky. When I woke up, I realized we hadn't collected any new firewood yet. Most of what we had burned the previous night. Ethan said he was going to take a short walk and explore while picking up sticks along the way. That was typical of him. He liked to wander alone for a bit and take in the scenery. I stayed behind to gather wood around camp. After about an hour, I noticed how long he'd been gone. It wasn't like Ethan to stay out that late in the woods, especially with the sun starting to set. There was no cell service out there, so our only way to communicate was with small satellite messengers we always carried in our waist packs, along with bear spray and other gear. I pulled mine out to message him, but saw that he had already sent me one a few minutes ago. It said, "Got kind of lost, but found the pond again." I quickly replied, "Stay there, I'll come to you." It's always safer to stay put when lost. I knew the area well enough to reach him before it got completely dark, so I grabbed my flashlight and started toward the pond. About halfway there, maybe 4 or 5 minutes away, my messenger buzzed again. I stopped and checked it. The message said, "I see you." I froze. I wasn't even near the pond yet. My stomach tightened as I looked around, but the forest was silent. I replied, "I'm not there yet. I don't see you." No response. I started running toward the pond, my heartbeat pounding in my ears. When I arrived, I scanned the entire tree line, but Ethan was nowhere in sight. The pond area was completely empty. I pulled out my messenger again. My last message to him hadn't even been read. I called out his name and my voice echoed through the woods. The sun was nearly gone. I didn't want to be caught out there in the dark, so I decided to head back to camp. I hadn't even started the fire yet, and if I waited too long, I might lose my way completely. The woods grew darker and quieter as I walked. That last message, "I see you," kept repeating in my mind. When I was finally near the clearing, I saw a faint orange glow ahead. My heart leaped with relief. The campfire was lit. Ethan must have made it back first. But as I got closer, I saw a figure standing near the flames. When the person turned toward me, they suddenly sprinted away from the fire and disappeared into the darkness of the trees. That was not Ethan. My chest tightened as I ran into the campsite completely on edge. I grabbed my messenger and sent Ethan several frantic messages, but there was still no reply. A minute later, I heard someone running through the woods. Ethan burst into the clearing, pale and out of breath. His eyes were wide with fear. He shouted, "We have to go, now." I told him about the figure I'd just seen by the fire. He nodded and said it was probably the same person he'd encountered at the pond earlier. He had initially thought it was me until the figure came closer. That's when he noticed something was off. The man had an unsettling smile that didn't look human. His face seemed wrong, like something was just off about it. When he tried talking to him, the man didn't respond. He just kept walking toward him. He panicked and ran, eventually spotting the campfire and heading back the same way I did. We didn't waste a second. We threw our gear into our packs, grabbed the essentials, and left the campsite immediately. The hike back to the car was silent, except for our breathing and the distant rustle of the forest. We didn't speak again until we were on the road. Later that night, I couldn't stop thinking about the first night of the trip, the noise we'd heard outside our camp. It wasn't an animal. That man had probably been out there the whole time, watching us in the dark.